Hello everyone, I'm Dan Pinchbeck, I'm the creative director of the Chinese Room, and this is the Dear Esther developers commentary.
Hi, I'm Robert Briscoe, I'm the artist on Dear Esther.
And I'm Jessica Curry, and I was the composer on the game.
So what you're looking at today is a remake of a mod. Dear Esther started off in 2007 as a Half-Life 2 mod that did really, really well in the modding community, which was fantastic, and as a result of that attracted the attention of Rob, who worked as the primary developer on a Source remake of the game that was released in 2012. And this year is another remake where it's been updated for a cross-platform release, and we wanted to add in this developers commentary just to give you a bit more of an insight into some of the ideas behind the game as it came together.
So you'll see around you in a lot of the environments, there's a lot of detail ingrained into everything. One of the things that I wanted to do with Dear Esther is bring the visuals up to the same kind of level of detail that Dan and Jess had put into the other areas of the game. So all of the history and the kind of hidden pieces of story that are intertwined with the VOs and the music and stuff, I kind of wanted to bring some of that into the environments. So if you look around you, you'll see that there's a lot of interesting bits and pieces, a piece of paper with someone's name on it, a photograph, an ultrasound. All of these little bits and pieces are kind of laid in to just kind of bring another aspect of the story into the game. And also, they're actually randomized, so every time you play, you'll see something different lying around. And this is just to build on this idea that everybody has a unique experience and a unique interpretation of the story. So you'll see around you in a lot of the environments, there's a lot of detail ingrained into everything. One of the things that I wanted to do with Dear Esther is bring the visuals up to the same kind of level of detail that Dan and Jess had put into the other areas of the game. So all of the history and the kind of hidden pieces of story that are intertwined with the VOs and the music and stuff, I kind of wanted to bring some of that into the environments. So if you look around you, you'll see that there's a lot of interesting bits and pieces, a piece of paper with someone's name on it, a photograph, an ultrasound. All of these little bits and pieces are kind of layered in to just kind of bring another aspect of the story into the game. And also, they're actually randomized, so every time you play, you'll see something different lying around. And this is just to build on this idea that everybody has a unique experience and a unique interpretation of the story.
Part of the point about the whole game, I think, was this idea that rather than having a linear, straight-through version of the story, that we could have multiple story units for each place you were. And I was really interested in this idea of how you can open up that space that people can interpret. So I loved the idea that you could have two people that had played this game and then would have a conversation about it, and one of them would say, oh, what did you think about when this happened? And the other person would be like, well, that didn't happen for me. I had a completely different event happen or a completely different story happen. And it kind of feels very gamey in that way, that actually one of the things I love about writing for games is that you hand over so much control to the player that it becomes their story, and that's really, really important rather than trying to force them. So using randomised blocks of voiceover in the game and the kind of randomised prop details that Rob was talking about means that it gives it a really different feeling every time you go through. And that's kind of interesting for me, because I like the idea of going, well, not everyone has to have the same experience, and because it's interactive, you have the capacity to have very different experiences occupying the same space. So yeah, but balancing all that then becomes an absolute nightmare.
I think it's nice though, because everybody gets a personal experience. Like, I love reading the forums and seeing how people come and they sort of tell their story and what they interpreted of it, and then you see other people discussing what they thought of it. And to me, it's kind of nice because everybody takes something unique away from it.
When I wrote the music for the mod of Dear Esther, there was absolutely no budget whatsoever for live players, so all the music was sampled. But one of the good things about that is it actually forced me to be quite creative about how I wrote the music. So with my background in sound art, I wanted to use samples in a different way that wasn't just using it to sound like a violin. I wanted to time stretch and manipulate samples to make something different and strange and quite unique. But then when we got the Indie Fund money, I had the amazing opportunity to re-record the music with live players. And that was so exciting for me, actually, because that's where it comes to life. And I thought long and hard about whether to write new music, going from the mod to the commercial version. But actually, I decided that my initial and original emotional response to the game was probably going to be the strongest response and reaction that I had. So I just literally, the music that I'd written for samples, I then wrote out for live instruments. But what they bring to it is transformative, actually. And I think The Beach is a really good example of this, where, you know, you have these awful samples soaring away, and then you have the string quartet playing this very bleak, very sparse music, and they bring the presence of the island immediately to it, and it comes to life. And that's the exciting thing about it. It wasn't a huge budget, but just having that experience of working with the players was just magical.
So people have asked why the Dear Esther's set on a Hebridean island. What's really interesting about this is one of those times when your kind of aspirations as an artist and the practical realities kind of dovetail. We knew that we had to have some way of limiting the player from disappearing off the play space, and when we made the original, it was a mod, and because it was a Half-Life 2 mod, you kind of had Eastern European city, spaceship, or blasted desolate landscape were your three options if you didn't want to start making any other assets. So it started off with these practical constraints. We don't want to set it on a spaceship, we don't want to set it in an Eastern European city, so it's got to be on this kind of like this desolate landscape. And we want to limit the player, so an island seems like a natural choice. And it's really interesting how you start from that, and we had this big lump of clay on a table that we were carving out paths and things to annoying the cleaners and things like that. And Jess and I were talking, and Jess started making sort of snippets of music to kind of go in there. And then all of a sudden we just went, oh, that's the story. Oh, that's what happened here. But it really started, I think, from the place. And when we started looking at photographs of Boré, we started going and reading some of the history behind it. Suddenly that was it. And it just was really, really naturally became, this is the place. this is what happened here, this is how it feels, and then everything else kind of coalesced around that.
Yeah, I think as an artist, it made my job a lot easier because those islands are so kind of like the environment is kind of hostile. You're out there in the Hebrides. You've got this kind of like inclement weather. You've got cold, rain, snow. It's a very kind of it can be a very depressing place to be at times, but it's also at the same time very beautiful, and it's this kind of like stark, bare landscape, but that has this beautiful surroundings. So it's, in terms of art, I think it really helped me to portray a lot of the themes in Dear Esther.
And there was a natural fit with the music as well. It suggested a musical style, which was really key, I think. Everything about Esther for me is a dream. The landscape is not an island, it's the dream of an island. The music is like music that you wake up because you've heard in your sleep, but you're not conscious of hearing it. And the language in the story was supposed to be like that as well. It didn't matter the sense it made, it was more about the kind of the shapes it created, if that makes sense. So that the words would kind of were like being in water, like listening to something underwater. It'd be this very dreamlike, symbolic, poetic. So people have asked why the Dear Esther's set on a Hebridean island. What's really
Dear Esther, the morning after I was washed ashore, salt in my ears, sand in my mouth, and the waves always at my ankles, I felt as though everything had conspired to this one last shipwreck. I remembered nothing but water, stones in my belly and my shoes, threatening to drag me under to where only the most listless of creatures swim. When you were born, your mother told me, a hush fell over the delivery room. A great red birthmark covered the left side of your face. No one knew what to say, so you cried to fill the vacuum. I always admired you for that you cried to fill whatever vacuum you found. I began to manufacture vacuums just to enable you to deploy your talent. The birthmark faded by the time you were 6 and had gone completely by the time we met, but your fascination with the empty and its cure remained. Donnelly's book had not been taken out from the library since 1974. I decided it would never be missed as I slipped it under my coat and avoided the librarian's gaze on the way out. If the subject matter is obscure, the writer's literary style is even more so. It is not the text of a stable or trustworthy reporter. Perhaps it is fitting that my only companion in these last days should be a stolen book written by a dying man. When someone had died or was dying, or was so ill they gave up what little hope they could sacrifice, they cut parallel lines into the cliff, exposing the white chalk beneath. You could see them from the mainland or the fishing boats, and know to send aid or impose a cordon of protection, and wait a generation until whatever pestilence stalked the cliff paths died along with its hosts. My lines are just for this: to keep any would-be rescuers at bay. The infection is not simply of the flesh. We are not like Lot's wife, you and I. We feel no particular need to turn back. There's nothing to be seen if we did. No tired old man parting the cliffs with his arms. No gifts or Bibles laid out on the sand for the taking. No tides turning or the shrieking gulls overhead. The bones of the hermit are no longer laid out for the taking. I have stolen them away to the guts of this island, where the passages all run to black, and where we can light each other's faces by their strange luminescence.